The sun had barely risen, casting a golden hue over the tranquil grove where the Buddha sat in meditation. Birds chirped softly, their melodies harmonizing with the gentle rustling of leaves in the morning breeze. The scent of blooming jasmine flowers lingered in the air, adding to the serenity of the scene. Disciples gathered around him, their robes neatly arranged, their faces eager and expectant. Among them was Ananda, the Buddha's devoted attendant, who carried an air of deep reverence and curiosity. As the Buddha opened his eyes, his serene gaze seemed to pierce through the veil of existence. "Master," Ananda began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "why do we cling to this world, knowing its impermanence?" The Buddha smiled gently, his expression a mixture of compassion and understanding. "Ananda," he replied, his voice calm and resonant, "attachment arises from ignorance, from seeing permanence in what is transient." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle among the disciples, who listened intently. "This world," the Buddha continued, "is like a river. It flows continuously, never remaining the same." A young monk, newly initiated, raised his hand hesitantly. "But, Master," he asked, "is it wrong to find joy in life's fleeting moments?" The Buddha turned to him, his eyes filled with kindness. "No, my child," he said, "joy is not wrong. What binds us is the craving for it to last forever." He reached for a fallen leaf, dry and brittle, and held it up for all to see. "Consider this leaf," he said, "once part of the tree, vibrant and green. Now it has returned to the earth, completing its cycle." The disciples watched as the wind carried the leaf away, its journey a silent metaphor for life's impermanence. Should we grieve for the leaf, the Buddha asked, or rejoice that it fulfilled its purpose? An elderly monk, seated near the back, leaned forward. His voice carried the wisdom of many years. "Master," he said, "how can we free ourselves from this craving and attachment?" The Buddha closed his eyes briefly, as if drawing from an eternal well of wisdom. "The path," he said, "is the Eightfold Path. It is the compass guiding us through the turbulent seas of existence." He rose slowly, his movements deliberate and graceful, and gestured toward the horizon. "Imagine a traveler," he said, "lost in the desert, parched and weary. When he finds water, does he hoard it, or does he drink and move on?" The disciples exchanged glances, the metaphor resonating deeply within their hearts. "Be like the traveler," the Buddha said, "grateful for the water, but not enslaved by it." A sudden gust of wind stirred the trees, scattering blossoms onto the ground like nature's own mandala. The Buddha observed the scene, his expression unwavering. "Even the most beautiful patterns," he said, "are swept away by the wind. Clinging to them only brings sorrow." The youngest disciple, barely more than a boy, spoke up, his voice trembling. "Master," he asked, "will I ever understand this truth fully?" The Buddha walked over to him, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Understanding," he said, "comes not from words but from experience. Meditate, observe, and the truth will reveal itself." The disciples sat in silence, absorbing the profound lessons that seemed both simple and infinitely complex. The Buddha returned to his seat, his presence a grounding force in the midst of existential uncertainty. "Remember," he said, "the Dharma is like a raft. Use it to cross the river, but do not carry it on your back." The day wore on, the sun climbing higher into the sky, its rays filtering through the canopy above. The disciples began to disperse, each carrying the seeds of wisdom planted by the Buddha's teachings. Ananda lingered, his gaze fixed on his master, who had returned to meditation. "Master," he finally said, breaking the silence, "you speak as though all is transient, yet your words feel eternal." The Buddha opened his eyes, his expression serene yet inscrutable. "Ananda," he replied, "truth is eternal, not the one who speaks it, Be a lamp unto yourself. Seek your own awakening. And with those words, the grove fell silent once more. The weight of impermanence felt unaccepted by all. Another day, another gathering beneath the ancient banyan tree, its branches sprawling like a celestial canopy over the assembled disciples. The air carried the scent of sandalwood and freshly cut grass, mingling with the quiet murmur of the nearby stream. The Buddha sat cross-legged, his figure exuding calmness, his presence commanding yet soothing. A merchant approached, his garments fine but his expression troubled, his hands folded in deep reverence. "Blessed One," the merchant began, his voice faltering, "I am consumed by my desires. They govern my life and give me no peace." The Buddha observed him, his eyes steady and compassionate. "Desires, like fire, can warm or destroy," he said, his tone measured. "Unbridled, they consume the mind." The merchant sank to his knees, his eyes pleading for clarity. "But, Master," he said, "without desires, what motivates a man?" The Buddha reached for a stone by his side and held it aloft. "What motivates the river to flow?" he asked. "Its nature is movement, not ambition. Its purpose is fulfillment, not possession." The merchant nodded, though the lines on his face betrayed lingering doubt. The Buddha set the stone down gently and turned his gaze back to the gathering. A farmer, his skin weathered by the sun and his hands calloused, rose to speak. "Master," he said, his voice rough yet respectful, "life is toil. How does one cultivate peace amidst labor?" The Buddha leaned forward slightly, his robes flowing like liquid serenity. "Peace is found not in escape but in balance," he replied. "The lotus blooms in muddy waters, yet remains untouched by them." The farmer scratched his head, the metaphor stirring something deep within him. "But what if the toil is endless?" he asked, his voice tinged with resignation. The Buddha's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Even the mountain yields to the river in time," he said. "Patience softens the hardest struggles." A woman seated near the front, draped in simple yet clean garments, raised her hand. "Master," she began, her voice steady but laced with sorrow, "my child is sick. I am consumed by fear and grief." The Buddha's gaze softened, his empathy palpable. "Fear clings to what it cannot hold," he said. "Grief resists the inevitable flow of change." He gestured toward the stream, its waters reflecting the dappled sunlight. "The river does not grieve for the rain that feeds it, nor the sea that claims it," he said. "It flows, accepting its path. Let your love guide your actions, not your fear." The woman wiped a tear from her cheek, her expression a mixture of pain and understanding. The Buddha turned his attention to a young man seated under the shade of the banyan's sprawling roots. The man's face was shadowed by doubt, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. "Master," he said, his tone challenging yet respectful, "if all is impermanent, what is the purpose of striving?" The Buddha leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed but attentive. "Purpose is not found in permanence," he said. "It arises in the moment, in the act of being." He gestured toward the sun, now casting long shadows on the ground. "The sun does not question its purpose. It shines because it is its nature." The young man nodded slowly, his mind wrestling with the simplicity and depth of the words. A monk, seated near the center, clasped his hands and bowed before speaking. "Master," he said, his voice filled with devotion, "you teach mindfulness. How does one remain mindful amidst the chaos of life?" The Buddha closed his eyes briefly, as if drawing upon an infinite well of wisdom. "The mind, like a flame, flickers with the winds of distraction," he said. "Stability comes from anchoring in the present." He picked up a small bowl and filled it with water from the stream. "Observe the ripples," he said, tilting the bowl gently. "They settle when the bowl is still. So, too, does the mind find clarity in stillness." The monk nodded, his hands pressing together in gratitude. The Buddha placed the bowl down carefully, its surface now smooth like a mirror. As the evening approached, the grove became bathed in the warm hues of twilight, the world seemingly holding its breath in reverence. The Buddha stood, his movements as fluid and purposeful as a river's flow. He addressed the gathering, his voice resonating with both authority and gentleness. "Remember," he said, "the Dharma is not a destination. It is the path itself, guiding you through the forest of existence." He looked around, his gaze meeting the eyes of each disciple, as if speaking directly to their souls. "Walk it with mindfulness, compassion, and an open heart. In doing so, you will find liberation." The disciples bowed as one, their hearts heavy with the weight of truth yet lightened by the wisdom imparted. The Buddha turned toward the horizon, the setting sun casting a golden halo around his figure. "Another day ends," he said softly, almost to himself, "and with it, another chance to awaken." The grove fell silent, the only sound the gentle rustling of leaves as the disciples contemplated the lessons of the day. Another day, another journey, and the Buddha walked with his disciples along a forest path as dawn broke gently. The birds sang their morning hymns, their melodies weaving through the trees and mingling with the disciples' quiet footsteps. As they traveled, the group arrived at a small village where the people awaited the Buddha's teachings. The villagers bowed deeply, their faces a mixture of reverence and hope as they offered humble gifts of fruit and rice. The Buddha accepted the offerings with grace, his movements deliberate and serene, his presence calming the restless hearts around him. "Blessed One," an elderly woman began, her voice trembling, "how do we find peace when death takes all we love?" The Buddha gazed at her, his eyes filled with compassion, and spoke with a voice as steady as the earth. "Death is not an end," he said. "It is a passage. As the river flows into the sea." He gestured toward a tree whose roots stretched deep into the earth, its branches reaching skyward. "Life," he said, "is like the tree. The leaves fall, yet the tree endures, nurturing new growth." A young man stepped forward, his face pale with grief, clutching a garland of faded flowers in his trembling hands. "Master," he said, his voice breaking, "my father has passed. How do I honor his memory without drowning in sorrow?" The Buddha stepped closer, placing a hand on the man's shoulder, his touch gentle yet grounding. "Grief honors love," he said, "but do not let it bind you. Celebrate his life by living yours meaningfully." The young man bowed, tears streaming down his face, as the Buddha's words eased the burden of his loss. A disciple, sitting nearby, raised his head and spoke softly, his voice carrying the weight of introspection. "Master," he asked, "if all is impermanent, is there any truth that remains unchanging?" The Buddha sat upon the soft grass, motioning for all to join him, his posture as steady as a mountain. "The truth," he said, "is like the flame of a lamp. It burns steadily, though the oil may change." He closed his eyes briefly, as though touching the infinite, and then continued with his gaze steady. "Impermanence itself is a truth. In accepting it, we find the freedom to live without fear." The villagers murmured among themselves, the profound simplicity of his words seeping into their hearts like spring rain. A child, no more than 8 years old, stepped forward hesitantly, holding a single lotus flower in her small hands. "Master," she asked, her voice clear and innocent, "why does the lotus grow in mud and not in clean water?" The Buddha smiled warmly, taking the flower from her hands, his fingers cradling its delicate petals. "The lotus," he said, "shows us that purity arises from adversity. It reminds us that beauty can bloom anywhere." He placed the flower gently in the child's hands, his gesture a silent blessing, and her face lit up with joy as the sun began its ascent, painting the sky in hues of gold and amber. The Buddha rose gracefully to his feet. He looked out over the gathering, his eyes scanning each face, each soul present in that moment. "Do not fear death," he said, his voice resonating with both authority and tenderness. "Fear instead a life not fully lived, a heart not fully open." The disciples and villagers bowed as one, their hearts lifted and their minds stilled, the words lingering like a sacred melody. As the group prepared to continue their journey, Ananda approached the Buddha, his expression contemplative and his voice steady. "Master," he said, "your teachings guide us. But what will become of us when you are no longer here?" The Buddha turned to him, his gaze unwavering and filled with profound depth, his presence as grounding as the earth. "Ananda," he said, "the Dharma is eternal. It will be your guide, your refuge, your light in the darkest of times." He placed a hand on Ananda's shoulder, his touch firm yet gentle, his words like a river carving its path. "Be a lamp unto yourself," he said. "Trust in your inner light, for it will lead you to awakening." As they walked on, the disciples carried the wisdom they had received, their hearts both heavy and light, full of purpose. The forest path stretched ahead, its twists and turns unseen. Yet the journey itself became the teaching. The Buddha's figure, serene and steady, led them forward, his presence a reminder that the path was as important as the destination. Thank you for watching. Buddha's teachings are always with you. Subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next video.